Hello, this is the Fiction Nonfiction Podcast from Literary Hub, where we believe that every issue in your social media feed or on the evening news has already been tackled somewhere in literature. I'm Vivi Ganeshananthan, also known as Sugi, author of the novel Brotherless Night.
And I'm Whitney Terrell, author of the novel The Good Lieutenant. Sugi, what would you do if a political candidate called Sri Lanka a floating island of garbage?
I think it will not surprise you to know that I would contact every Sri Lankan I know, which is a lot, by the way, and encourage them to contribute to that person's political demise.
I'm glad you put the word political in there. That seems like a good thing to say in
Keep it
this
restrained.
highly charged environment. Earlier this week, Trump's kind of stopped doing that, threatening people with death regularly on a regular basis. Earlier this week, and we're recording before the election, the comedian Tony Hinchcliffe actually called Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage at Trump's Madison Square Garden rally, which the New York Times referred to as a carnival of grievances, misogyny, and racism.
I was like, wow, finally the headlines are unleashed. Tyler Austin Harper of The Atlantic had one of my favorite tweets about this, which he called the rally Bigot Coachella. Um, in which case, Tony Hinchcliffe was definitely one of the headliners, not only because he's so awful and racist at this point, that's like par for the course, but also because his comment ticked off so many Puerto Ricans that, like, maybe places like Florida might be back in play.
As I said, we're taping this episode on Saturday, November 2nd, 3 days before the election, and it will air on November 7th. So I don't know. People may not know what's happening in the election on November 7th, but we at least are blissfully unaware. Or maybe we haven't participated in the great celebration of the election yet. We'll find out.
I'm pretty sure that when this episode airs, we're going to be in cliffhanger territory. So while we're all biting our nails, cultivating our ulcers, etc., we wanted to think more seriously about Puerto Rican history and writing.
And to do that, we are joined by my new University of Missouri, Kansas City colleague, Jennifer Maritza McCauley. Jennifer has been awarded fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts in prose, Kimbilio, Canto Mundo, and the Sundress Academy for the Arts. Her work has appeared or is forthcoming in Boston Review, Passages North, Puerto del Sol, Afro-Hispanic Review, Latinas, Protest and Struggle, among other places. She's the author of the cross-genre selection collection Scar On, Scar Off, the short story collection When Trying to Return Home, and the poetry collection Kinds of Grace. When Trying to Return Home was an editor's choice for the New York Times, a must-read of 2023 by the Chicago Public Library, a best fiction book of the year by Kirkus Reviews, and most anticipated by Today. Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. This is so great.
We're thrilled to have you with us. And I'm looking forward to talking to you about your work. But first, our news peg, this stinker Tony Hinchcliffe and his comment about Puerto Rico. You are partly Puerto Rican and you write about that community and identity. So I'm just kind of curious where you were when you heard about Trump's rally and Tony Hinchcliffe's remark, how your communities reacted. Because I was telling Whitney, my family is Sri Lankan. And if he had said that about our island, our WhatsApp groups would have been on fire.
Yeah. I will say that they were pretty strong reactions and they were pretty angry. Um, so my mom, who's born in Guayanilla, Puerto Rico, she was the one who told me about it. I had just gotten out of class and she called me and she said, I know all the horrible things that, this comedian is saying about Puerto Rico, but let me tell you, I'm a proud Puerto Rican. So I don't care what he has to say. So that's what she said. Um, Actually, can I read what she texted me? She wrote me this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She wrote something very lovely that I wanted to read. Um, let's see. Okay, so she said, Jennifer, I know my island is beautiful. I don't care what this ignorant man thinks. I was born in a shack with a dirt road in front of it, and that was beautiful. There is warmth in my culture, and that's beautiful. There are men playing dominoes in my culture, and that's beautiful. I remember the mountains as a child, and those were gorgeous. Nothing erases that beauty no matter what they say. It's a beautiful island. That's not going to change. That person's set of values are ignorant to me. Islands are not garbage. This island is gorgeous. My love for my culture is not going to change. So that's what my mom texted me. So I was like,
That's
Oh,
oh,
amazing. Was
Yeah.
that like right immediately afterward? Was like the MSG rally still going on when
Oh
she got
no,
in touch
no,
with you? Oh,
this
okay.
was much later.
All right.
But she was, because I was really angry, but I think that she had a different reaction to it, and I thought that was really interesting. It was just full of pride. She just bolstered her to feel even more pride for her island, you know. So I think that was really interesting. But a lot of anger for sure, a lot of anger, a lot of rage. Um, you know, I was angry, but I was also not surprised, unfortunately, because a good bit of the rhetoric that's been coming out of that Trump campaign has been that they've been projecting since even before the 2016 election bid has been dismissive, divisive, and oft reprehensible to me. So I personally was angry, but not surprised. And it's depressing that these kind of comments, um, I don't know, in a supposedly progressive country are becoming more commonplace. So, I think a lot of us were upset, not surprised, and like my mother said, she was full of pride. But one of the things that made me so excited was seeing all of the Puerto Rican flags all over my timeline on social media. So many people were supporting Puerto Ricans and, you know, kind of coming to our defense. So, and Puerto Ricans were obviously, very, at least the ones that I talked to, were very prideful of their culture. So, there was a lot of different reactions to it, but
I'm curious about whether were any of those reactions specifically about organizing people to vote against him, facilitating other people's votes.
yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, so I saw there's a couple of kind of funny things that were going around that were saying the Puerto Rican diasporic trash collection day is election day. So I thought that was pretty fun. So there were there were a lot of things to get people out to vote. But it's a very complicated issue too, in diaspora communities and on the mainland. Um, and on the island, their reactions and their kind of frustrations with American government. So yeah.
Well, I mean, as you said, it's not surprising that um, Tony Hinchcliffe would say this, or that Trump, by the way, has been asked about it, and he keeps saying, "Oh, I don't know, I'm not aware of it. Somebody said something. I don't." He couldn't say like, "I disavow that. I do not think that was a good thing to say," because of course he's been saying stuff like that all along, right? And yet, and now it's important to say we're recording this before the election. It's Saturday. Who knows what's going to happen between now and the election, and who knows if we'll even know the results of the election by the time this posts on Thursday. But I mean, just today, just last night, Trump gave fake fellatio to a microphone. So maybe that's going to take over this entire story. So he's looking like she doesn't know what that is, but it did happen. It's very disturbing.
Whitney, stop
But
making stuff up. We've talked
I'm
about this.
not.
Stop making shit up.
I
Nope.
am not. Trump is having like a mental breakdown in real time, and I don't even know if he's still going to get elected. But so
Mhm.
Seems fine to me. Seems okay.
one of the things that he's been relying on is like an increase in young male votes from communities of color. And yet this seems like why is it yet it seems like this really did finally break through. I
Mm.
mean, a rapper who supported him bailed, um,
Yeah,
and so why this one thing after all the tremendously racist things he said in the past?
and I'm still, my feelings are still that I still need to see what's going to happen because I feel like from all of the conversations I'm having, there's still a lot of division. But I think that there is a lot of solidarity in the sense that, Puerto Ricans are proud of their culture. I think they're very angry because, I mean, these are reprehensible comments. And I think that they would, if you insert any group and then say that their place of origins, the place they care about the most is garbage, you're going to have a strong reaction to that. And then everybody started laughing too. And I think that was really frustrating too, because it wasn't just this person saying this in a vacuum. It was the entire crowd was laughing and they were rooting and they were excited about it. So I think that seeing those images, I think, especially for at least people that I know within the Puerto Rican community, I think that they were absolutely, infuriating. But like my mother said, she, for her, that didn't impact her view of herself because she loved the island. And I think Puerto Ricans are so upset about it because they know how beautiful Puerto Rico is. They know how powerful its people are. and they know the impact that the diaspora communities have had on the U.S. So I think that's why we know our value, so we don't like that being stripped away from us.
When you say that there's still, you just said something about there's still some controversy. In other words, like I have a friend who's from a small town in Missouri who is arguing with her friends from home about them wanting to support Trump and them refusing to back down. Are there still within the communities that you're communicating with are people who were Trumpers being now say, "See, I told you shouldn't have liked that guy"? Is there argument there, or is there like a unanimity, like, okay, we're not supporting Trump?
I feel, and I'll be honest, from the communities that I'm a part of, people are just kind of staying on the side they were already going to be a part of. I don't see a lot of switching, but that's just the communities I'm a part of. But I do think that you're seeing a lot of Puerto Ricans coming out and, I mean, I think that Mark Anthony and Jennifer Lopez were endorsing Harris and things like that. So I think that there's like reactionary endorsing. Um, but I think that, kind of where people were kind of internally, they often are still, because I've talked to family members or something and we talk about who you're voting for, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm still going to vote for this person because of such and such reasons. So yeah, I don't know. It's it's wild right now. So I have no idea what's going to happen.
Um, I was
You
thinking
want
about a couple weeks ago, we did an episode following Trump's horrible comment about Haitian immigrants.
That's a great episode.
And I was just thinking about, I don't know, like what is the effect on the show if just ever like if we use as our news peg horrendous shit that guy says all the time. So we got to talk about that, Whitney. We can't do an inadvertent Trump's racist comment series.
I know.
But also, so like another continuous theme of this is that I have been traveling a lot this fall, and Whitney is like a little bit his news sources are different than mine. So what happens is like I land and then Whitney calls me on the phone and tells me something outlandish that has happened that I have not realized was happening. So in this case, Whitney
Yeah.
called me last night and he was like, Biden was on a phone call with Hispanic voters and tried to comment on what Tony Hinchcliffe said and ended up saying that Trump supporters were the real garbage. And then he tried to back away from that. And I was like, Whitney, I can't, it's too much. I cannot. And he was like, no, it still goes on. The Trump campaign has leapt on this. They're using it as campaign material to make Biden seem elitist. Trump gave a speech in front of a campaign branded garbage truck. My Google searches are a shit fest. At the time we got to Halloween, he was telling me like MAGA people's favorite costume was garbage men for the holidays. So like, why does this just metastasize and metastasize? Like, why? I don't want to get any more phone calls from Whitney with like terrible information that I'd love to pretend he's making it up, but he's actually not. So how does this discourse transform like this? Why?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I can only speak for myself in the situation, but I think in this one, I thought that it was more of a kind of a, I'm going to call it a ripoff reclamation, because for Harris's supporters, they reclaimed the whole Vance's child is cat lady thing, and that became a big thing. So I felt, at least in that situation, that Trump supporters were trying to jump on the chance to do the same and take a kind of page from their playbook. That's what I thought, but I don't know. But it's still, I don't know, it's all frustrating to me. But I think a lot about what Ta-Nehisi Coates said many years ago when he was writing about the Trump presidency, and he was saying that Trump was America's first white president. And I think that he often promulgates this certain community and whiteness, which is incredibly dangerous. Um, I think that it taps into deep-seated racial divisions and exploits them. Um, I think, but beyond that, I think I just have this incredible sense of sorrow that there is this normalization of racist and xenophobic um, rhetoric. And it's just, I don't know, it's very frustrating. And what bothers me too is that there's a pride in these racist discourses. So exactly, if you go back to Puerto Rico, just the amount of people that were cheering, and that it wasn't really the comments that got me, it was the crowd. And that's what really kind of, because I was like, these are the voters. These are the people that when I walk around in the street are around me. I don't know, who they are. I don't know what they're thinking, but any one of those people, or, I may have been in that route. Um, so I don't know. There's a lot of things to kind of think about. I don't know exactly why it metastasizes, but I do think that, um, forming these communities based on trying to form a community based on whiteness is very, very dangerous. And I think that Trump often does that, and he often runs on racist, xenophobic, homophobic forces, and that really bothers me.
I felt like they were trying to reclaim the energy that they got out of the Hillary Clinton deplorables comment in the
Oh, right.
2016. They're like,
That's
That's
what
what I
okay,
it
this
remember.
is
was.
going to be our deplorables moment. But
That's what it was.
unfortunately, it's not. It doesn't work that way. First of all, the candidate didn't say it, right?
Yeah.
And like, you know what? Hillary Clinton meant that. You know, like
Yeah.
gaffes don't work unless it represents something that is widely perceived to be true about the person. And the same day that Kamala Harris was, that this was happening at MSG, Kamala Harris, gave that speech on the mall to 75,000 people saying, I want to be a president for everybody and I want everyone give
Mm.
everyone a seat at the table. And she's, I don't think people really think that's her position. And she didn't say it. And Biden
Yeah.
misspoke. I mean, I just don't think it's going to stick.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Harris was talking about launching a Puerto Rico Opportunity Economy Task Force. I um like this is one of those things that like when it's announced, I'm a little bit like, but what does that mean? Um, right. Ensuring that Puerto Ricans can access clean energy is one of the things, talking about disaster relief, talking about grid resilience, so infrastructure, like actually a lot of things that I think sound like they make a lot of common sense. And I don't know, that I think are like a baseline of decency, that I would have expected any president to already be interested in doing in Puerto Rico. This is like a particular camp, like, so her campaign was aiming for Puerto Rican voters before this Hinchcliffe thing happened, which I think is worth noting. And like also like it's a sizable population, right? Another thing Whitney was telling me last night was about he was like, people were talking about, is Florida still in play, right? But it's not just about, like, say, Florida. There are huge numbers of Puerto Rican voters living in swing states. And then I looked it up, and there are more than 472,000 Puerto Rican diaspora voters in Pennsylvania, for example. And of course, like, everyone's wondering, which way is Pennsylvania going to go? So I don't know if can you talk a little bit about where Puerto Rican diaspora communities historically are in the US, and like what you hear people talking about, what they wish would happen back on the island.
Yeah, absolutely. So, definitely a lot of them are concentrated in New York and the East Coast, in Miami, pretty much all over in Houston as well. Um, I I honestly don't know what the effect is going to have on the community because, like I said before, I think that, this is just me, and this is just maybe me wanting things to work out, but I don't know. Um, I think that a lot of folks have already kind of chosen their side already. And I think, in swing states and in Pennsylvania, I think that, I think for Puerto Ricans, I think comments like that comedian made will absolutely influence what they're going to do. But I think for some people, but I think for other people, they're just kind of fixed in their reaction, in what they're going to do. So I, I think it could go either way. I mean, that's just me. I don't know. Maybe I'm just not confident in this.
Well, we don't know
I'm,
what's going to happen.
I'm just
But I mean,
nervous.
I do think it's worth using this as an opportunity. We're bringing this in because of this is a big election deal, but also, past the election, which we will be by the time this broadcasts, I think it raises the question, which Americans don't tend to think about, is like, what should American policy be toward Puerto Rico?
Yeah.
Um, you know, people living in Puerto Rico don't get to vote in federal elections. This has to do with its status as a territory rather than a state. Should that continue? Will it ever get to be
Right.
changed?
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about what rights Puerto Ricans have and don't have compared to mainland citizens?
Unlike many other islands in the Caribbean, Puerto Rico doesn't have this distinct liberation narrative. So during the Spanish-American War in 1898, the U.S. invaded the island. It hadn't been It had been a European military post from about the 16th to 18th century. And it was neither a state nor independent republic. And by the Foraker Act, it was considered foreign to the United States in a domestic sense, which is by the Supreme Court, which is kind of interesting. Um, so it was eventually granted U.S. citizenship and individual civil rights through the Jones Act in 1917, which was signed by Woodrow Wilson. And it was considered a Commonwealth in 1952. Currently, they have a multi-party system. So they have the Popular Democratic Party, the PNP, the PPD, which is pro-Commonwealth Popular Democratic Party, and the PIP, which is the Independence Party. So the kind of colloquial way we kind of refer to it as the Statehood Party, Independence Party, and Commonwealth Party. So often Puerto Ricans will vote for, many years ago. It seemed as if Puerto Ricans were voting for statehood, but actually, when I was on the island and studying UPR at that time, a lot of folks were protest voting. So that has been complicated. But anyways, rights-wise, Puerto Ricans have been U.S. citizens, like I said, since the Jones Act of 1917. They can work, they can study, they can live in any U.S. state or territory. Um, they can't vote in the Electoral College, but they do have representation in Congress. Um, so they can pay federal taxes, um, but they receive less assistance than US citizens. They don't have full protection of constitutional rights, and um, they're self-governing, but the US still has a claim over them. So I think hopefully that answers your question.
So as someone from the DMV, which is DC, Maryland, Virginia, to me, this reads very similarly to the narrative of like DC not having statehood. That's like a majority Black
Right,
city, right?
right.
It's like a very like democratic, left-leaning city. And like why there's of course a certain contingent, I would say generally Republicans, who don't want them to have like representation in Congress. And so certain aspects of like the sort of back and forth of the rights that Puerto Ricans have, it sounded very similar to me. And I wonder if that's accurate. Like, are people who want Puerto Rican statehood largely Democrats, and are people who are like, why would anyone be opposed to that? And I assume that that's like presuming that those would be mainly Democratic voters, right? Like that representative to Congress that you mentioned, that's a non-voting representative
Yeah.
to Congress, like Eleanor
Yeah.
Holmes Norton of DC, who just kind of goes and says a
Hmm.
lot of things, but doesn't have a vote.
That's
Um,
true. Yeah. Um, and what was the last question? I'm sorry.
I'm just wondering if my analogy to sort of DC is correct. Like, is it right to presume that the people who want Puerto Rican statehood and representation are mainly in federal elections Democratic voters, and that people who are opposed to Puerto Rican statehood, whether they're in Puerto Rico or not, are largely conservative voters?
Yeah, I would say statehood would be center right, probably.
Really
Yeah. Hmm. So,
interesting.
yeah,
Another way to look at this might be that it's actually very conservative to want statehood, because then you're kind of copying to colonialism, like saying we are part of the United States. This is very patriotic, right?
yeah,
Whereas like maybe a further left position would just be to say Puerto Rican independence.
yeah. So, I mean, a lot of my friends are kind of the PIP. They're kind of they're pro-independence. I would say that, and a lot of other friends are, I have friends all around now I think about it. Um, but I think that Puerto Ricans have, like I said, they have a great, and I can't speak for everybody, but from who I talk to and what I know, the folks that I've met and talked to have had incredible sense of pride in their culture, in their identity. So I think that becoming part, it seems like it would be a great idea to be part of the United States as a state, but at the same time, it would be one of the poorest states in the United States, and I don't know. I think you lose your entire cultural identity in that sense if you become a state. But I don't have really opinion about it. So I think, but that's some of the friction that Puerto Ricans have. So I talked to my mom, and she is, she doesn't have an opinion, but she would say that she sees the negatives towards statehood. There are also positives to it as well. But yeah, I think it definitely can potentially be that standpoint.
Jennifer, I'm so sympathetic to the community is coming for you feeling. And like as someone from a diaspora community, I was I was interested in the ways like of course, like analogies are always flawed. I think I was sort of presuming, or it's easy to presume, that Puerto Rican statehood is the progressive position because it indicates like right representation, et cetera, et cetera. But it's also like a kind of right copping to like the colonial power. So
Yeah.
and you were talking before about the history, which was really great, the Jones Act, et cetera. And during this period of time, right, also there, of course, Puerto Rico has an indigenous population, and there's the Spanish, like a strong African presence. There's a real like the Puerto Rican identity and culture is a unique mix of these things. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about, I don't know, like the most powerful parts of Puerto Rican culture for you and the indigenous, colonial, and other histories that kind of lead to that.
Yeah. So, since the Spanish first colonized Puerto Rico in the 16th century, slavery heavily impacted the cultural, political, economic, and agricultural practices of Puerto Rico. And it also led to mixing amongst the Taínos, who are the indigenous population. And they were already on the island. And then the enslaved and the Spanish ended up mixing. So there's a great deal of pride in Puerto Rico's mixed history. If you go to various cities around Puerto Rico, you'll see a statue of an enslaved woman. You'll see a statue of Cristobal or something. And then you'll see a statue of a Taíno, and they'll have them all together. So Puerto Rico is very proud of its mixed culture. The only problem with that is that there's this danger of romanticizing the mixing, and that potentially kind of pushing the Afro-Puerto Rican population to the side. So it's if, oh, we're so mixed, we're so different, but then the group that has been disenfranchised the most, which is Afro-Puerto Ricans in Puerto Rico, and the indigenous population that's left, they end up getting kind of brushed aside in what they call mestizaje. So that's the mixing. So that can brush over slavery's roots in the island's history, but overall, then this mixed culture is something that Puerto Ricans are generally pretty proud of, and that you'll see a lot of writers writing about. And it's really important to me as well. I think that as an Afro-Puerto Rican woman myself, um, I'm half Black American, and I'm Black American, but I'm Black American and Puerto Rican. Um, so I think both of those cultures and the kind of influence um, of African influences on Puerto Rico has definitely been inspiring to me personally.
Well, speaking of that, we would like to have you read some from your work. The title story of your collection, When Trying to Return, gets at some of these unique identity questions, and also, talks about diaspora communities on the U.S. mainland. I wonder if you could read us a section from that.
Yes, absolutely. So this story is kind of the title story from the collection, and it deals with a woman who is Black and Puerto Rican and kind of wrestling with the death of her mother and what her mother's death means to how she's going to pass down her culture, how she's going to kind of interpret it, how she's going to navigate it. Okay. Now that Andra has moved to South Florida, she has become Andra, Black, and something else. In the northern city where she grew up, they called her, "Hey, you." In the Midwest, where she lived with her father after her parents' divorce, she was Cal's baby. In Puerto Rico, where she watched her mommy pass in Ponce, Andra was La Negrita, la hija de Nadia. This month, Andra has come to South Florida for a position at the marketing firm, and her coworkers ask her about that something else, or properly, where she is from. When she says the northern city, they say, no, I mean, really. So she tells them she's Black. Specifically, her daddy is Black American, her mommy Caguas born, mixed with several something else's. Her coworkers get dull-eyed hearing this. They're satisfied. She's bored too. This is a new thing, to have a boring conversation about race where nobody cares about her answers. In this Florida city, she is like everyone, bubbling with somebody else's language, body full with misted ancestors, yearning for old ghosts. In her second month in the city, Andra has gotten along fine. September wind is variously mild. She's afraid of the new rain, how it slams and sticks. Her coworkers tell her Florida is like this. The rains look hurricane strong, but they'll abate soon enough. She learns how to drive better in storms. She is no longer scared. The rains let up soon enough. Andra has gotten along just fine. She finds friends from all over the city who speak slanty Spanish like her mommy did before she died. She's found friends from many countries, and they take her shopping at flea markets, bring her mangoes plucked from backyard glens. They get ropa vieja at circle tables and laugh and laugh. Andra can finally relax. Her shoulders stay sweet. She considers these the kindest months of her life. Andra has gotten along fine, but she wonders about that something else her friends ask about, if it's something she's missing.
Thank you so much. I really like that section, partly because it seems to get at the complexity of identity and also like the locations of diaspora community that we were talking about earlier. So thinking about that political history and discourse we were just analyzing, I want to ask you, when you write about Puerto Rico, what kind of lesser known truths are you trying to center in your work and what tropes are you resisting?
Yeah, that's such a great question. These are all such amazing questions. So I've always been interested in why stereotypes exist in the first place, and I think that that's a preoccupation of mine because when I was growing up, I was stereotyped a lot as being a Black woman, as being a Black Afro-Puerto Rican woman, which most people didn't really understand what that meant. So just being a Black woman. Um, so I was very frustrated with those things, and I wanted to write against those, but also create characters that are messy, that are multidimensional, that are complex, that don't fit into boxes. So that really mattered to me. Um, I'm also interested in how we can destroy stereotypes and how we can limit using them because we all have unconscious biases and they're very strong, especially in this country. So I think that there is so much that we can chuck aside and people that we can reduce to one dimensionality that I think that we can move away from. So that's something that I'm trying to do with my fiction. At least I attempt to try to do that. Um, so I think the reason I'm a writer is I want to know the full complex person, and I also want to see them in all of their triumphs and all of their messiness. I think the big thing for me when writing about Puerto Rican diaspora communities or Afro-Puerto Rican diaspora communities or Black American communities is that um, I want to create our own representation. I want folks to be able to go to bookstores and pick up our books and read about our experiences. I didn't always have those experiences when I was growing up. So it's kind of creating our own representation. Um, but I also want to show that there's a lot of beauty to our cultures and there's a lot of complexity to our cultures, which is the biggest thing for me, that it's not, oh, everything is amazing in my culture and everything is fantastic. It's like we're all great. We're angels just hanging out all day long. Like, no, we're people. Like we mess up, we make mistakes, we're happy, we joyful, all those things. So that's definitely something I wanted to portray, which seems pretty simple in fiction, but the problem is that when marginalized people are reduced to that one dimensionality, they don't get that sort of ability to be seen as these fully fleshed out people. Anyway, so that's what I'm trying to do with my fiction, and that's what I try to publish, and that's what I care about.
Well, we don't know whether you know what, whether Kamala Harris wins the election or Trump wins, the Trump era is not going to be over at the end of this election. And the thing is that that's the struggle right now is that the country that we're going to have is going to be a lot more, the people in it are going to be a lot more like the people that you're describing who are from mixed backgrounds. I mean, Kamala Harris herself is from that kind of background. And the Make America Great Again movement is based on not wanting to grant that kind of complexity to people or not wanting people to have complex racial identities like that. I mean, I don't think it's an accident that Trump also came out and said, "Well, Kamala Harris is not black. She's South Asian. She can't be both things at one time. Or if she is, she's being dishonest." Like a
Yeah.
misunderstanding of the idea of racial complexity is part of what that movement is about. Part of what
Mm.
that joke is about that we started talking about, I would think.
Yeah. It's amazing. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming to join us and for joining us at UMKC in general. I'm thrilled that you're working with me and we're working together and teaching our students together. And
Good.
listeners, please don't miss When Trying to Return Home and Jennifer's other work, which is available at an independent bookstore near you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Jennifer.